to maybe the easiest guy skill-wise I've had to evaluate in this class now in terms of the level of player he is. We'll see, but I do think that Collin Murray-Boyles it's Boyles, right? Not Boyle. Collin Murray-Boyles, plural.
Boyles. Yep.
There's multiple
Multiple
Boyles.
Boyles. Yeah.
The most Stone Hansen basketball player I've ever seen, and we'll get into exactly what that means in a little bit. But the whole time I was watching him, all I could think about was Stone likes this guy because he's like exactly like Jeremiah Robinson, or always like he's a better athlete, but like that's all I can think about the whole time. Anyways, Collin Murray-Boyles listed at 6'7", 240 pounds. He's 19 years old, so he's a really young sophomore. June 10th, 2005. His rookie season will be his age 20 season. So really, really young. This season at South Carolina, he averaged 16.8 points per game, 8.3 rebounds per game, 2.4 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.3 blocks on 58.6, 26.5, 70.7 shooting splits. There's some interesting numbers here. 115 offensive rating on an awful team, worth noting. 27 usage, 59.9 effective field goal, 63 true shooting, 8.8 offensive rebound rate, 23.8 defensive rebound rate, 21.1 assist rate, 17.6 turnover rate, 4.7 block rate, 2.9 steal rate, 55.6 free throw rate, 26 dunks, 69.7 on close twos, 39.5 on long twos, 70.7 from the line, only took 2.13 3-point attempts per 100, meaning he shot 9 of 34 on the year, again, for that 26.5%. First thing I want to do, Stone, does 6'7" seem accurate to you?
Yes, it's a soft 6'7". It's a strong 6'6" or a soft 6'7", somewhere in there.
Yeah, I'd agree. For what it's worth, he's really strong. I don't know how plus his wingspan is, to be honest, but
It
he's
it
yeah, go
looks
ahead.
like a plus like 6 at
Yeah.
least.
It's solid, especially with his he has really broad shoulders. He's well built. Again, when you consider his age, it's impressive. But he has not been the most. He's had a weird 2 years. We're waiting for Coop to get back for Bart stuff. But what I will say, and where I want to start this conversation before we kind of do some more statistical analysis, is, positionally, I find CMB really tough to parse. The free throw number is just on that borderline of like maybe there's some projection there, but the 3-pointer does not look comfortable. He was basically never taking it confidently, and he's not a good shooter. I also do think we sometimes, like I say, is that free throw number is borderline. How much of that is just because it ends in a 0? 70 feels like a good cutoff, but is 70% really actually that much more? How far is that from 68%? How far is that, from whatever? So I just, I don't have a great feeling on him as a shooter. Right? Defensively, I have some questions. I just positionally is really interesting, but Coop is back with a different background now. Looks a little fancier. Coop, do you have some Bart queries for us on Mr. CMB?
Actually, you have Bart queries on CMB. I didn't make any. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's great. Okay, so this first one is block rate above 4, steal rate above 2.5, field goal at the rim above 65%, dunked 20 times, freshman, sophomore, high major. I feel good about going freshman, sophomore here because he's so darn young. But this is an interesting one where I didn't want to focus on drafted guys because I just kind of wanted to see the general area. What type of guys are this efficient at the rim? Have the athletic defensive numbers, and sort of what's the company like? Because in my mind, and this is going to be a thing that comes up a lot, I really think of Collin Murray-Boyles as a big in a lot of ways, and I think that matches. Bang got Dak did it in fairly limited minutes for Colorado. I really like Dak as like a pre-draft guy, and a guy who's going to make some noise next year. But other than that, Sorber is a guy who is in some draft talk, really didn't popped to me a ton in what I've watched, but is getting that range. But again, 6'10". Dak is 6'11". Sorber looks like a pretty real 6'10". Bona from last year, real 6'10". Now Ryan Dunn, more in the realm here, right? But Ryan Dunn played as a big man for Virginia in a lot of ways. Going back, F.A. Boogity, maybe one of the more interesting names here, Devin Vassell is one of the few true wings that did this. Chuma Okiki, also more of kind of a real wing that did this. But when you look through this list, it's a whole lot of bigs. And the non-bigs either had really questionable NBA careers, not NBA careers at all, or had a very, very special skill when looking at one Andre Roberson. So, Coop Stone, do you guys find this to be a worthwhile stat profile here, stat query, or not really meaningful to you guys?
I think it's got some value here. I real ethical, because I think it shows a baseline level of athleticism and just motor that comes along with these stats. Typically, like you're looking at a guy who, you know, as a dunker, and gets after it defensively by making plays on the ball. So I think it does show a level of just hustle, for lack of a better term, and just motor across the board. And I think that really shows in the guys that are in this query as well. You mentioned Dak, other guys like Bona, Dunn, Boogity, all these guys really, Bell, Cauley Stein, Noel, like they have really great motors. And I think that's something that we'll get to in a little bit, but that's sort of the biggest takeaway from this query, in my opinion.
Yeah, I really like the variety of big men, forwards, wings, just different kinds of guys who, and also a lot of them are very unorthodox. You have your traditional run and jump bigs, and you have Zion, who's one of the greatest athletes we've ever seen. Who's completely different from a Ryan Dunn in just about every single kind of way imaginable. Who's kind of similar to an Andre Roberson, but the two of them are completely different styles of defenders. Even I think that it helps inspire a lot of hope in what Collin Murray-Boyles could potentially be, and that there's not just one path forward of, well, he's a small ball center and he has to shoot the ball. There's roads here that aren't just that.
Yeah, no, and I think that's fair. So the other one I did, it basically undersized players, so players 6'9" or smaller, and I do think that CMB is comfortably below 6'9", who were drafted in top 30, who made less than 40 dunks, and also shot below 30% from three. And I did limit it to high major. That didn't really make a huge difference, but just to narrow this list a little bit. Ryan Dunn seems to have had a successful rookie season so far, but some of that is that he had some like crazy outlier shooting at the start of the year that has come back down to earth. Isaiah Stewart has obviously developed into a really plus shooter, though Isaiah Stewart is maybe the player I got the most vibes from watching CMB, just to be completely honest. I think their numbers are fairly similar, and I just got a lot of Isaiah Stewart vibes from CMB, although CMB was used more as a passer. I don't know that he was actually a particularly more effective one, but we'll talk about that later. Wendell Moore comes up from that freshman season where he was awful. Look at that. Wendell Moore, 27.6 turnover rate as a freshman is wild. Grant Williams, PJ Washington, Rondé Hollis Jefferson, Bryce Johnson, Julius Randle, RHJ again, DeLon Wright, Chris Dunn, Kyle Anderson, Victor Oladipo, Tony Roten, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Trevor Booker, Solomon Hill, Derek Williams. Couple things I'll really note here. A lot of these guys have way bigger, crazier stock rates than CMB. They were either flamed out partially because they couldn't shoot in time, or they developed to be at least solid shooters. There's a guy like a Grant Williams, right? Like, not really a good shooter, but can really play the five and take shots, has had his years. PJ Washington really developed into a shooter, and again, he didn't leave Kentucky until after that sophomore year. Rondé Hollis Jefferson had some good seasons, but fell off partially because he couldn't shoot. Also, similar stock rates, but I believe dunked more, even though that's not showing up here. Bryce Johnson kind of flamed out a little bit because he couldn't shoot. Julius Randle, kind of just a different player, but also has developed at least a competent outside jumper. And then there's some guards mixed in there. Kyle Anderson is maybe the one that's closest to CMB archetypally, again, aside from maybe Isaiah Stewart, although we'll talk about that. So anyways, I thought this was an interesting list of guys, some guys who made it, some guys who didn't. Coop, Stone, any thoughts here? And then if not, Stone, I'll throw this to you first. Let's start on the defensive end. Just walk us through why you love CMB so much defensively.
Yeah. As far as this query, I'll be quick here. A real unethical. If the only reason I have a anti draft pick in a query sentiment, I think it should be open to all draftees. But that is just my opinion. But outside of that, I mean, I think it is reflective of the impact a lot of these guys had outside of shooting. I think a lot of these guys coming into the league, and a good portion of them never ended up developing a shot, but a lot of these guys ended up impactful and earned minutes early on in their careers, even without being much of a floor spacing threat. So I think a lot of the names in here are indicative of that. When it comes to CMB's defense, I'm a sucker more than I should be, admittedly, for guys that are just extremely technical. This has been my MO with every sport, to be honest. Like, I come from a skateboarding background. I very much love technicality in my sports, and when it comes to basketball, that's no exception. I think CMB's footwork is a big distinctor than why I like having um, both these guys, Queen and CMB, in the same podcast, is because we can kind of go back and forth and the differences between them. I think the footwork is a massive separator here. And why I think CMB can survive against a lot of matchups on the perimeter, because I think he's not only just very technically sound with his footwork, but extremely smart with the angles that he takes and directs offensive players to. This is a big separator in how he and Queen operate on the perimeter defensively, because I think oftentimes Queen is reacting, and I think CMB is directing, and I think that has a lot of value in a guy that is bigger. Now, he's not the fleetest of foot, despite being technically sound. Against a lot of guys that are quicker, he's going to really struggle because he's not quick enough because of the size that he is. He could definitely slim down a little bit, if I'm being nice, and I think improve mobility a little bit, but I'm not sure it's ever going to get to the point where you want him against any sort of guard or anything. He's always going to struggle against quicker guys. That's just the reality of it. The extremely long wingspan, I think, makes up for a lot, though. He doesn't make mistakes often, but most of the time when he gets beat, it's just because he can't keep up, as I had just mentioned. And I think that he reaches really smartly. He doesn't foul a ton with his reaches, and being able to keep himself inserted into play with a swipe, or making up ground coverage from behind, even though he's not the quickest load time as a leaper. I think really makes him a guy who can survive against certain matchups on the perimeter. I think interior wise, he's really going to be a strong post defender because his center of gravity is much lower than Queen. Just they're built very similarly in that they're sort of undersized bigs, but also differently in the proportionality of where their weight sort of sits. And I think with Murray-Boyles, he has a much stronger base and lower body. Not to say his upper body is weak by any means, but um, I think he absorbs contact a lot more proportionally throughout his body because of where his center of gravity sits. And I think that makes him, along with his wingspan, a really strong post defender. The load time, as I mentioned previously, is really slow. I think that's going to be the one drawback when it comes to post defense or interior defense as a whole. And I think the hands are not as quick as Queen. But when Queen's not applying it as often, I think that becomes less of a debate. I think also too with Murray-Boyles, he's a weird defender in the sense that he's not quick enough as a load time leaper to be a rim protector in the traditional sense of a guy who's swatting away shots and contesting at the rim in the air. But he's almost never positionally out of place. He's always in the right spot to be some sort of deterrent for drivers when they're coming in. Um, now, if it's the right sort of driver that's athletic enough, excuse me, and can finish around the rim over him, I think he'll have his challenges against those sort of guys that are just athletic freaks. Um, but I think against a lot of players, he's going to be someone that probably can survive as a full-time five, not only because of the strength he shows as a post defender and the great footwork that allows him to be positionally in place for that, but also where he always places himself on the court. He's rarely rotationally late. He's rarely out of place. He knows exactly where to be. It comes down to the actual physical verticality of it when it comes to him, and that's where he's going to struggle, notwithstanding reach or anything, but with just the load time it takes. Um, but apart from that, I think he really shows a lot of the things that can allow him to survive as a full-time five, which, as we'll get to offensively, is probably where he's going to be best at. So that's sort of my take on him defensively.
Okay, so I know Coop is going to give the negative swing here, but I do have some takes I want to get off first. The first is I agree with Stone on one thing specifically, and that's that or two things, I guess. One, I think he's going to be uh great guarding fives. Like for an undersized guy, he's going to be really effective guarding the likes of a Jokic or an Embiid when he's healthy. Potentially an Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley's quickness worries me. I'll talk about that in a second. But stronger bigs, even though he's smaller, he's going to do a great job on in a very, and not to say this because this guy gets comped all the time, but in a very Draymond Green way, a Grant Williams-esque way, where even though he's smaller, sometimes those guys struggle more with smaller guys because they can't get leverage and they can't just like bury, right? So if you're making Jokic catch further outside, even if your contest might be a little worse than a bigger guy's contest would be, it's a lower percentage shot than him catching right on the block, right? So I think that is important. I think he's also technically like pretty darn perfect. And for a guy his age, that's really impressive. Like he's rarely in the wrong spot. He's constantly making reads. He's surrounded by awful defensive talent that he has to cover for all the time. And he does a good job of that. But here's the thing with it. He's at his best as a low man away from the main action. He's going to struggle to cover enough ground to be the low man and get back out to shooters. He doesn't play and drop a ton, but I'm not really sure he could do it. His size and athleticism just I just worry about him playing in drop, and he can't switch. His defensive first step is so bad. Like Derik Queen has a better first step defensively. Collin Murray-Boyles, who we'll talk about in time, has a way better defensive first step. Like So there are times where when Murray-Boyles has to guard like an even kind of close to NBA level guard or wing athlete, he gets completely dusted, like completely left out in the cold, and he doesn't have the tools to be a good recovery defender. So he's a guy who you have to find a way to keep around the rim, um, who defensively can guard like really guard fives, good fives. But the truth is, there's only so many of those guys. Can't really switch. And even when you're keeping him around the rim, I don't think he's like a crazy elite rim protector. He has great timing and he's strong. He can absorb contact. I bet you he can be a Jalen Williams, take a ton of charge this type of guy, and use his strength and meet guys outside the lane. But he's going to really struggle to close out if a team is playing like four shooters, right? So, and then in drop, I don't think he can be a good enough rim protector to actually be effective there. He can't switch. He can probably get to the level and get back again, kind of in that Derik Queen mold where he's using his strength to, really bump guys off their line and try and get them flattened out. But I think there's only so much upside there. And the truth is, I've been burned on guys like this before. Technically, really good defenders who are just really athletically limited. I like those guys. I want to like those guys because that was me. I was a technically very good defender who was always in the right place and knew what the other guy was doing, but I got jumped over at the rim. And Murray-Boyles is going to get jumped over at the rim by some of these guys. Like he's a good athlete, but he's not a quick leaper. His first step is awful. He can't really turn like at all. So like if he's sprinting on a closeout, he can't like turn around to get back into the play. Like he's not a one effort guy in terms of his motor. I think his motor's good, but he's a one effort guy in that physically he can only make one effort because he can't turn around quick enough to get back into a play and make a second effort. So I want to like him defensive, and I think there is utility here in that if in very specific matchups he can be like great. I think there's a world where there is not a guy I'd rather have like guard Nikola Jokic one-on-one than CMB. And I really mean that. But there's only one Nikola Jokic in the world. And what does he look like in those other settings? I'm just not sure of it. Coop, what's your take on his defense? And then Stone, I'm sure you're going to want to refute some of what I said.
So I tend to lean more towards Bryce. I think there's just a lot. There's only, we talked a lot about center defense and the value of center defense. And it feels really weird to jump onto the center defense really matters a lot, and you have to be really picky about it train here after just talking about Derik Queen. But I think my whole argument for Queen is that the defense is not as important because the offense is so good. And we'll get to the offense with CMB, and I just don't think it's anywhere close. But defensively, I think he's really talented. He's really good. Like you talked about, I think he's just super strong and, technically correct and in the right spot. But if you are going to be a 6'7" center defender, you have to be perfect in a lot more ways than just positioning. You have to be perfect in terms of anticipation. You have to be the perfect kind of athlete. And I don't think CMB is the perfect kind of athlete to play this kind of small ball five, like you talked about. You have to have, all these certain things line up if you want to be Xavier Tillman. And I just don't think that CMB is that level of athlete. He's not switchy at all. It's just a really hard sell, especially because when we talked about, Bryce, I think we went back and we talked about centers over. Did we do that with Stone, or was that just you and I? When we talked about
it was just you and me.
It was just you and I. And we talked about specifically, I think our conversation on Usman Garuba was really illuminating because there is only so much value you can add as a 6'7" defender who is like trying to play the center, who is trying to be like the center point of a defense. And even if you're really good, Usman was a really talented defender. He was really skilled. he was a way worse offensive player than CMB, but he was, arguably had better hands and was more of a disruptor and was a better mover and a better rebounder. But he wasn't as impactful defensively because he's only 6'7", and he wasn't a vertical athlete, and he wasn't out there making plays on the floor because he wasn't athletic enough. And I just really worry that CMB is going to have a lot of the same issues and is going to just kind of fall into, the Grant Williamsville. You have to fit so perfectly with the team you're going to end up on. And I don't think that CMB's defense is valuable enough to demand that kind of particularness.
You're on the right track there.
Specificality.
I like that word a lot better.
I'll concur too, and I'll say, there's a chance that he just kind of sticks around too because he's so tough. He's he's gonna get boards. He's gonna bring his lunch pail to work every day and a hard hat and all those cliches, right? Like, again, I can't help, as someone who's coached a team that has been top 3 in defense in the league both years I've coached. Like, I can't help but love a guy who's just this tough and this smart and this willing to try and do the right thing. Like, all that stuff is great, and he'll stick around based just on that. But in terms of what the actual value he'll bring defensively is, I'm just really not sold. If he was a superlative rim, if he was a little bigger, if he was a more superlative rim protector, or if he could actually guard even 4s in the NBA consistently on the perimeter, I'd be a real fan. But if he's matched up against Evan Mobley in the post, like, is Evan Mobley just going to dust him? Is if he has to guard, I don't know. I'm blanking on names. I think you can guard some real, big, strong superstars, but there's some guys who I think surprisingly would just, blow him out of the water, right? Like, could he guard like Luka at times? Maybe, like, those strength-based creators he could really bother at times, but I don't like anyone with real quickness. Even like Austin Reeves would give him nightmares, right? Like, that's a problem. Like, there's just for a guy like this, he's just not good enough at guarding enough kinds of guys to be valuable. And we've seen what happens with these types of guys. I mentioned Jeremiah Robinson Earl. Jeremiah Robinson Earl was a much better lateral mover. He wasn't as strong physically, he wasn't as good of a rebounder. But much quicker laterally. And he still fell into the issue of he just couldn't guard enough guys. Grant Williams, I think, is a terrific post defender. He's really smart defensively, but he just can't guard enough guys to be valuable. I worry in some ways of that with CMB. Stone, tell me if you think we're wrong, if there was anything we're missing. But if not, then start to transition to the offense and what you think about CMB as an offensive prospect.
For as much as I do like CMB, I don't disagree too much on your sort of synopsis and analyzation of maybe a lack of versatility. The one thing I would say is just I really struggle to bet against guys that are this high feel to not figure out how to stay on the court in some way or another defensively. Like, I think he's as good as Cooper Flagg in off-ball tracking. Now, he can't have the same impact because he's not the same athlete and can't make the same sort of plays on the ball or get to where he needs at the same sort of speed that Cooper Flagg can physically. But I think in terms of just reading the court and reading the ball and his man simultaneously, like, I think Cooper Flagg is really the only guy that parallels in this class for me so far to really be on that sort of same level of reading the court. And I just really struggle to bet against those guys to not find a way to outsmart their way into production defensively. Having said that, on offense too, I think CMB is equally smart offensively as he is defensively. It just doesn't have the same impact in terms of what the level of production will be. So I think he is extremely smart in a way that sort of reminded me with when we talked about Chris Murray in terms of the angles that he takes as a driver. Like I think he's really smart with the angles that he takes. I think he is a lot of times going to outpower guys to the rim and just bully them because we've talked about these guys that are super processors in the past and really high IQ. We just mentioned Jeremiah Robinson Earl. We've talked about Jeremy Sohan in the past. I think what separates CMB from those guys is just how strong he is. And we talked about how strong Queen is. I think Murray-Boyles is stronger and knows how to use it better than Queen. So I think it's more functional coming in. Also, I mentioned the lower center of gravity. I think that helps on offense too. I think he's able to get himself positionally angles that otherwise wouldn't exist if he had the same level of high hips that Queen does. I think guys just sort of bounce off of him a lot of times. That's not to say that there aren't matchups that can stifle him. And I don't think he's a good enough ball handler, at least, especially to like the level of Queen, to be able to take guys off the dribble the same way he can in college. Like, I think what he does in college is good enough to get by in college and be as effective as it is. But I don't think it's going to be that same level in the NBA. I think he's someone that's going to go against a lot of tilted defenses and have things already created for him, and he's going to be much more of a finisher than any sort of creator in the NBA. But even with that, like I think there's a level of effectiveness there with making the right decision so often. I don't think he's really he's I think he's going to draw a lot of fouls in the NBA because of the angles that he takes, because of the strength and the fakes that he can get guys in the air with. Um, I think he's slow. The foot speed is slow, and that's why it's going to be just purely brute strength based creation that only works against certain players. That's not going to work against everyone in the NBA because no matter how strong you are, some guys, if they're just too quick for you, and they have quick enough hands, like I think he's going to struggle with that. Um, I think that uh, I don't buy him as a shooter, especially to the level of Queen, and that is why I think he's a full time five. I think that he's good enough to survive defensively as a five, and be really effective, not just survive, but be effective as a five defensively. And I think offensively, with the lack of shooting and the level of finishing, with the strength that he has, um, I'm a lot more willing to put a full time five label on Murray-Boyles than I am with Derik Queen. And I think that's sort of going to be where his role is no matter the team he goes to. Like I think he is just a center. It's going to be a small ball center, obviously, in terms of the height, but he plays a lot bigger with the wingspan and strength that he has. Um, so I think that's really where it comes down to me. I think he's a great passer out of post ups, and as someone that's going to be, primarily generating a lot of offense via the paint. That is something that is really valuable. He's not the Derek Queen level of passer in terms of the. I don't think he's the Queen level of passer in the types of passes that he can make, but I think he is actually better at reading secondary lines of defense and help defense than Derek Queen actually is. So he's really like making ill-advised passes or generating turnovers off of passes because he's just not making the wrong reads. And I think that has a lot of value. So he's not going to be a lob threat or anything. And I didn't mention Derek Queen's rebounding. I am now, and I think both these guys are high level rebounders. I would put them on par with one another. I think both these guys are just going to be absolute rebound guzzlers at the next level. But in terms of the Bryce just went another place with that. But in terms of the offense, like that's sort of where I fall into as a short roll guy who can make things out of passes and someone that's going to be a driver and post up paint finisher primarily.
It man, I just don't see the advantage creation. I mean, you say he's stronger. I think he does have better footwork. He added so much value in college offensively off of post ups, and I don't think that I hate you, Bryce. I don't think that that is going to be something that will continue at the NBA level, because I think I just don't buy the passing in the same way. Even if he is technically a better passer, and you look at like the way he reads the back line, he just doesn't create advantages in any
He's a
kind of.
tin merchant too. I don't want to get too into this, but there are two types of big man passers. There's ones who can actually pass, and there's one who operate the Princeton chin. And there's obviously, it takes some level of skill to operate the Princeton chin, but that's a lot of what he was doing. He's not throwing a ton of crazy advantage passes. He's throwing a ton of passes where he's standing at the top of the key and there's down screens going on either side of him, and he's just making a read off of that. He gets a lot of his assists are he hands the ball off and the guard drives or shoots behind the handoff. He can throw a post pass, but I thought he really struggled with doubles. And not that I don't think he's going to get very many doubles in the NBA, but I do think that he really struggled with it, especially doubles crashing down from top with bigger guys. And the NBA is full of bigger guys than the SEC. So I agree with you in that I don't really buy his passing. I think he's a good enough passer. Like, he's a good decision maker, but he's not a great processor. He can't really create advantage. He's not going to, I don't think, turn the ball over much in the NBA, but he just can't, like, he's not going to be anything more than, a ball mover in terms of his passing, I think. Anyways, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, I really just don't think that there's any kind of feasibility for his offense. So maybe then he's just a DHO guy, but I don't buy the handle in being able to be like Queen, where for me, Queen's worst case scenario, he's one of the better DHO players in the league, because the handle allows him to get downhill and his touch is good. And he's just, I think he's just a bowling ball in a way that CMB is not. Maybe CMB is like functionally stronger and can move guys around a little bit better technically, but I just don't think he's just not as quick and not as forceful. And the handle's not as good. So he just can't be the same level of DHO threat that a guy like Queen can. And I don't know. I don't see him as a short roll guy. I think, I don't know if we talked about that much with Queen, but I really think that he's a really interesting player out of the short roll because he makes decent decisions. He's really good at hitting other bigs or cutters out of the short roll. And CMB's just not an advanced passer in that same way. And I think there's just a lot of, the finishing's good. There's a little bit of driving stuff. And if you get him a tilted defense, but he's not going to draw a closeout. So how often you have to get him a tilted defense out of the pick and roll, and then he's just a ground bound finisher who's not going to make passes out of the short roll, who's not going to, he's not like a lot of the other players who succeed in this kind of short roll, undersized pick and roll player kind of way. He's not like a Bruce Brown. He's not like a Draymond Green on offense in that way, right? Like, he's not. So there has to be more accommodations made for this guy who already you have to accommodate him defensively a lot. And now you also have to accommodate him offensively. And he's not adding the kind of value, even when accommodated, that it's really worth completely changing your team scheme, even for just bench units or even for like certain lineups for. And that's kind of my worry. Very skilled player, but just a very strange skill set that I think is hard to fit into the NBA.
I'm going to disagree. I don't think it's as hard to fit offensively. I just think he's a 5. He's not like a rim running, lob threat 5, but I think that's what he is. If he's going to shoot, it's going to be to the level that a 5 can shoot and not what a 4 does. It'll be, I think there is a chance, just in that the mechanics aren't broken. Though you would have liked to at least seen an increase in volume from his freshman year to the sophomore year, and that didn't come. That might be the coach. I don't know, but I mean, it doesn't look like a comfortable jumper. He catches and then he kind of does the Gumby thing with his body where he kind of like his whole body sort of like whips into a shot. Like, it just doesn't look very. I mean, it doesn't look broken, but it doesn't look very good either. He that takes a lot of time to get off. I do think his handle is legitimately fine if he's guarded by bigs. Like when a five has to step out on him at all, or like if he's operating DHOs, with like a shooter, I think he can turn that downhill fine, and he's quick enough to beat a big, strong enough to get that big on his back, and then can finish. He's a good finisher at the rim. Can finish with both hands. Not a crazy vertical athlete, but I think we'll be fine there. I disagree with you a little bit. I think he's a fine short roll passer, Coop. I just don't think he can like he struggles to like in those kind of mid-range areas. That's where he struggles to make moves with the ball in his hand. He can throw passes from there, but like that's where like someone like Xavier Tillman separate himself, is that Xavier could catch and then hit like an in and out dribble and score. Derik Queen can't do that, or Derik Queen, excuse me. Derik Queen can. CMB can't. CMB is an okay handler in space, but in tighter places where he has to play angle more, he's not a great handler. But I think he can make passes out of the short roll. I think the odds are pretty strong that he's a bad offensive player in the NBA, in my opinion. That's fine, because I think he's not going to be playing a role where he has to be a good offensive player, but it just puts a lot of weight on that defense. And I just, as we transition to the value, that's what I don't know. I want to like Collin Murray-Boyles so bad. I really do. But I don't see a world, even with his youth. The youth is the one thing that makes me think, man, maybe I'm overthinking this. And he's just so young and so productive. But he was on an awful team this year. He was on a good team last year, for whatever that's worth, with Michi Johnson. But just an awful team this year. A lot of the production came when teams were, basically thought that their games were over, and he did play well against good teams, and he was the top of the scouting report, and he still put up numbers like this. Like, all that is important. He's in a good conference. I can't get the Isaiah Stewart vibes out of my head, and Isaiah Stewart is only a guy because he's so tough and he makes wide open shots. And if CMB doesn't make wide open shots, I'm just not, I think he's smarter than Stewart was. I think he's a more technically sound defender. He's probably a better vertical athlete, but it's pretty marginal. I mean, Isaiah Stewart had some pretty big dunks back in his time. I'm just not all the way there with CMB. I think CMB's I think he's going to stick around the league, but I don't think I can have him in the same tier as VJ and Ace. And he's comfortably below like a Derik Queen, Dylan Harper, Trey Johnson. So he's the sole member of my tier 5 right now, with the understanding that, hey, end of the first round, I'd take a bet on him pretty happily, just because, again, youth production, but with the understanding that a lot is going to have to change about his role and who he is, probably. Like, I just think defensively he's a 4, but offensively he's a 5, and that's just not like. There's very few guys who are like that. Even as a 4, he can't move his feet very well. So I don't know. I struggle to really get on board. Coop, give your negative spin too, and then we'll let Stone tell us how stupid we are and why CMB is going to be a perennial All NBA player.
Yeah, you dummies.
CMB. Really, the best way to put it is you had Rondé Hollis Jefferson in both of those Bart queries, and I was like, wow, I love Rondé Hollis Jefferson. Rondé Hollis Jefferson is awesome. And then it's like, well, Rondé's not in the league. Why is he not in the league? And then you go through the list of reasons, and it's like, well, he probably should be in the league because he's awesome. But it's really hard to come to. I have fallen in love with with every single. I like to think of it as the avatar. I think Collin Murray-Boyles is the current avatar, and there's all the past avatars. There's Gary Clark. There's Rondé Hollis-Jefferson. There's all these guys that I've fallen in love with throughout the years who have this exact same profile. And maybe I just need to stop the avatar cycle. Maybe I need to blow this up because I cannot keep getting eaten for this. I want to like him, and I think he's exactly the kind of player you should be looking to take, like from 14 to 20, in a good draft. You get a guy who can put up stats in college, profiles as a good player, and could potentially be in your playoff rotation. And there's a world where he's a playoff starter in certain matchups because he is so good against certain matchups. But there's other playoff series where he's just not playable. And maybe he develops, maybe he figures some stuff out and he finds a way to be more playable. But it is so hard as a 6'7" big man to do that. You have to be so special, and I don't think CMB is that level of special. Now in this class, he's probably going to be top 10 for me just because of how the numbers are going to work out on my board. And I think it's going to be a really tough fight between him and Trey Johnson for a long, long time, just because I think that they're so different as players. But I am cheering for CMB, and I really want him to succeed. But he's currently between VJ Edgecombe and Trey Johnson, currently occupying the 4th spot on my board. So, Stone, tell us why we're dumb, man.
No, you're not dumb. You're just wrong. But I think I'm going to end up with CMB probably top 3, at least for the time being until we get to other players. But he'll be 3rd on my board, and I don't love it, to be quite frank. I think that the class pass flag, and to some extent Harper is just not as strong as you'd ideally hope for. And he's 3rd almost by de facto because I just don't like anybody else more than him. And in most drafts, I think I'd be more comfortable taking him in the late lotto range, in the 10 to 14 type of area. But I think I have him as high as I do because I feel more confident and comfortable in him being an NBA player than really I do anybody below him, to be honest. I think I think he's closer to his median outcome than a lot of players that we've previously talked about so far, and I think that even his lower end outcomes are more valuable than a lot of guys that we've talked about so far. So I tend to gravitate towards valuing these lower and median end outcomes more so than the high end outcomes, because generally speaking, the attainability of those high end outcomes is just such a high threshold to meet. So I think that's it's just a difference in perspective, I guess, in terms of where you rank guys. And um, if you buy high end outcomes as something worth betting on higher, that I totally get that too. But he's going to end up 3rd on my board, and as much as I talked about him in a good light in this episode, I actually don't love that ranking for him, but I just don't love anybody at 3 at this point in time, and I happen to like him more than most other guys, so that's where I'm going to end up with him so far.
Yeah, I mean, I can't fight you on it. I mean, again, no one would be happier than us if he succeeds, because what a success! Do you guys remember when we first started this pod, and I was like, one of my main goals is to find the next PJ Tucker. That's that could absolutely be, if Collin Murray-Boyles could shoot 37.5% on corner threes and guard Nikola Jokic, then he's the next PJ Tucker. So
he might have to
might
have to go to Russia first, but I mean, we'll see. He's going to have to go on a journey of self-discovery, and then he can be the next PJ Tucker.
And buy 6,000 pairs of shoes.
I do hate being so low on it. Maybe this should make me reconsider, just because I do think, I like CMB better than VJ and Ace. I do. And he's not any older than those guys. In fact, I think he might be younger than VJ. I don't know. I just can't escape the fact that I don't think his floor is meaningfully more valuable than, even though I think his floor is an NBA player, I don't think it's meaningfully more valuable than falling out of the league, to be honest, like at least in the all the senses that matter to us. And I don't see the, like, he doesn't have the same type of attainable ceiling as those guys. Like there's basically no star outcome for CMB. The closest thing is, again, like that. I don't even think he can be a starting center, be a backup center on a good team. And that's, listen, if you're a backup center on a championship team, you're a top 20 guy in my mind in most drafts, assuming that you play real minutes and you're a backup center in a way that's valuable. But like, I take Xavier Tillman 20, 25, top 20, 25 in most drafts. But I just, like, if you're saying that's like the ceiling, I don't know. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's my worry. Anyways, this has been a great podcast, a great experience as always with my guys, Coop and Stone. Our first time doing some video stuff, so let us know how you guys feel about that. We'll be posting that all over, and hopefully this will be a consistent thing. This will still be in your podcast feed, so if you like to listen to us on your drives or whatever, all right, these two, you're not even close. You're not even close.
It's because we're white. Don't judge us.
And now I'm gonna have to figure out, do I want to leave this part in the podcast version to make people think,
They
oh,
have to
let me go click
understand.
on the YouTube video
Yeah.
to see what they weren't even.
Yes, yes.
Horrible
And then
radio.
they can give us a second listen. They can
Yeah,
go all the
there
way
you
through and not
We-
just skip all the way to the end.
We're 5 years into the podcast, and we just figured out how to engagement farm. So
Yeah,
we
I guess.
will be
I
exploiting this.
I guess.
Yes.
All right. No, this has been great. Eventually we're gonna have to post the Upside Swings King of the Court game that the three of us will someday play. Where I just spend the whole time. I won't score at all. I'll spend the whole time trying to dunk on Coop. That's all I want to do.
And
One
it
of these
will
days,
never happen. It will never happen.
and I'm so close to being able to dunk with two hands again. Like, I've been working really hard in the gym and eating healthy and all that stuff, and like, I'm like so close. And all I could think about is like, man, I'm just gonna dunk on Coop someday. I'm just gonna fucking punch on him. 6'3" for what? I
My
haven't.
God, dude. 6'3" for stomping dudes without. I'm CMB on the court, dude. That's all it is. Okay, that's why I want to see these guys succeed, because I'm
You
an
could tell this
undersized
dude went
center.
to Houston. That's
Yeah.
Cooper is the most Jared Vanderbilt pickup player I've ever seen.
Oh,
in my
dude,
life.
that's actually so true. Yeah, because Stone and I have actually played together. That was a good time.
That was the worst I've ever been, but I will redeem myself. I'm healthy now, so
I play pickup like Hornets Terry Rozier. That's
Yeah, dude, that's so evil.
That's
That's actually
disgusting.
so fucked up.
talk about non-ethical.
Yeah. No, we're sitting here. Oh my God. Yeah.
everything
Isn't
I
it-
do. I'm like, would this look cool? And then like I do play hard on defense though. Like I am gonna try and lock.
And then you bet on yourself beforehand.
But my goal, like, I'm gonna play hard on defense so that you can't get mad at, and I'm gonna guard the other team's best player so that you can't get mad at me when I take that tween step back off one leg. I'll be like,
That's so
when
valid.
you're guarding the other team's best player, you can take that shot.
You're everything I hate in prospects. But I love you.
I'm not in another world. If I'm playing like good real 5-on-5, I play like Colin Knipple. But if I'm playing like pick up at the rec, Terry Rozier all the way. That's my spirit in. Or Colin Sexton, maybe you could say Colin Sexton is the modern version of that, I guess. But anyways, that was a whole tangent to end this. But this is a great episode. Our next episode, like I said, will also be a video podcast. We'll be talking about Kasparis Tsakusionis. I think that's how you say that. And Igor or Agor. They've said it a couple different ways. Demon. I do know it's Demon.
I'll do my homework and I'll have the pronunciations for everybody.
Yes,
on that.
I trust Stone more than I trust anyone else to get those. But we're excited for that. That's going to be a really exciting pod. But for Coop, at Ali_Roop_Coop, for Stone at Report_Court. I'm at Bryce-14. Give us a like, rating, review, like and subscribe. I finally get to say that after all these years. And this has been the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. We hope we hit our ceiling. Thank you.
Wait. Oh, I'm supposed to end the recording. Yeah.
Keep it in there. Keep it in there.
Yeah, keep that in.